And we're live. All right. Hi, everybody. Good to see you today. Lucky to join here today with Jake Stoll from Readies. We're going to talk about terms and make Readies and all the kind of intricacies and opportunities in that space. For everyone listening, maybe it's your first time catching up, or if you've been tuning in a number of times, this is Getting to Hell Yes. And the thing we talk about the most in Getting to Hell Yes is the nuances about finding buyers that are seeking to commit to change. Why is that different than kind of the conventional process we've always kind of are accustomed to? Is that a Hell Yes buyer is already identified the problem they're seeking to solve, or it's persisting in the regular day, and they're kind of fed up with what's available. I mean, typically when we look at problems in the world, you can solve them one of three ways. You can solve them with hiring more people, which is great when there's a bench full of people. You can hire vendors to do it, which is great if you're not competing with the same people as you are with vendors in your market, which is kind of what we feel in this space, especially when it comes to make readies and managing make ready process, and or technology and process. And the tough part is that the thing that we're most often comfortable doing is often the thing that's holding us back from making a significant change. So we talk about folks that are frustrated with the alternatives that are available today. And that puts them in a position where they're like, forget it. I'm tired of being disappointed, let down, poor quality, whatever, variability that comes with my previous solution, and I'm going to seek a new way of doing it. And that's where people like ourselves, people like Jake at Ready, we want to have those conversations. The challenge is finding those that are seeking to solve those problems, because not everyone kind of looks the same on LinkedIn or in Zoom Info or at a conference. And so it's trying to kind of narrow in on what if you're familiar with poker, what tells are they giving the world that they're seeking to solve those problems or having troubles with it? And how can we begin to be there from a position of helping and not rather than persuading? And then we can kind of like begin to really find a way to help solve their problems. That's what we kind of think about a Hell Yes. And so we've been really lucky to have a ton of guests on the show to help us with that conversation and navigate specifically with property management. And the nuances of property management, we'll always talk about different like owners, vertically integrated versus third parties versus fee managers, all those things. Makes it a nuanced conversation. I see you're smiling already. If anybody has any questions throughout the show, feel free to shoot them on there, and we'll jump at that and make sure we're able to address those in real time. And as always, this is brought to you by IRCX. We are remote inspection, remote maintenance software to help you solve problems and eliminate those unnecessary trips, unproductive trips, make your techs team or your vendors teams or life a little bit easier. And then of course, save a whole bunch of time and money along the way. With that, as always, pass it off to Jake, who's sitting in North Carolina right now and probably just coming off the storm of Aaron storm, or at least the heavy winds. But tell us a little about, Jake, about yourself, your life journey to get in here, and they'll kick it off around the problem that you guys are solving at Rent Ready and why people are seeking to solve that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I think it's a fantastic podcast, LinkedIn Live thing that you're doing, trying to get to that really, like you said, nuanced answer, because there's a lot of different facets in this industry. So I, like almost everybody that I talked to, kind of fell backwards into multifamily. So I moved from Virginia with my wife out to South Dakota to live the tiny home life. And I was looking for a job and found a leasing job. And so there was a leasing agent position open, and it turned into some kind of leasing manager, maintenance supervisor, hybrid position, because there was 3 of us in the office overseeing about 600 units. So wow. we stayed busy. Weirdly enough, there's a PropTech industry out there a little bit, because there's the headquarters for Property Meld that's out in Rapid City, South Dakota. Randomly placed. Love them there. They're a fantastic company. And kind of as I was going through the maintenance headaches, banging my head against a wall sometimes, I was thinking there's got to be a better way to do a lot of this stuff. And so that's when I came across Property Meld and realized that they were local and that they were nice enough to hire me. And so I started working with them a little bit. That kind of sent me down my rabbit trail of PropTech. So now I'm in Charlotte at Ready. It's a phenomenal company out here in Charlotte. We're doing turns for large portfolios. So our whole shtick is that we're a national turn service provider. We kind of help standardize the turn process by having an operations team here in Charlotte, a network of vendors all over the country, and a software that kind of backs everything up and ties everything together. Oh, we're still here. Okay. So I am really loving working here, and we just kind of ended up working with some fantastic people out here in Charlotte. So that's kind of how I landed in property management and at Rent Ready.
So we've all seen a make ready board, right? And the 6x12 or the 6x4 whiteboard is by definition the most that is, it's difficult. It's not digital. It doesn't scale well, but it might be the most used tool. That one, and of course, you can't forget the sticky note.
That's sticky notes,
right? Between the sticky note and the whiteboard, that's some pretty hefty competition with respect to getting people to change or consider a new way of doing things. I hope everyone can hear my sarcasm. Why do people? What happened in their life? They're like, no more. We're not doing this way anymore. We need to digitize this, automate this. We need to get serious about this.
Yeah, that's a great question. Usually it kind of comes from the top down is what we've seen. So it's a lack of visibility because all this information that's on these whiteboards in the back of a maintenance shop in a basement somewhere, it's all siloed. Right. So the management is kind of in the dark for trying to figure out what's going on the day to day, especially with make readies and seeing where things are at. So they're relying on a lot of planned telephone. So when they try and figure out how to standardize this process and how to get a little bit more clarity, that's usually when they run across us. We're able to not just get this stuff digitized and making sure that it's accessible and visible for everybody, but then our software helps automate a lot of it. So I mean, as soon as somebody puts in a notice to vacate, all of the scheduling for all the vendors that are coming out to that property is already done for you. So it's a little bit of a combination between trying to get things done a little faster. We see some clients with really long turn times that they're trying to cut down because we did a turn study not too long ago where they saw an average of about 18-day turn times, which sounds insane, but it was a couple hundred people did this survey that we put out, and that's what the result was. It was really high. And then people trying to cut that down to like a standard of 5 days, which is what we've seen, be like the goal for management companies, and we're statistically at a 4.25 day turn time, I think. And then the other half of the people that kind of run across us when they're kind of fed up with everything is again with the visibility stuff. So they want to see dashboards, they want to see how things are broken up, how much time is being spent in a unit per service, how much things are costing per service, how much it's costing in total to turn a unit by bedroom, all that fun stuff. And rather than compiling a bunch of different reports and trying to make it work, it's usually where we can step in and help them out.
And so when they look at the kind of the old way of doing things, like, I'll just use whiteboard as the example, like did something happen? So you say top down. So is that top down? Let's maybe, if you could explore a little bit, how is it different? Is it different than vertically integrated versus a fee manager?
It is a little different because the top looks a little different. So I mean, if you're all asset owned versus fee managed, ownership conversations look a little different. At the end of the day, from what I've seen, it's pretty similar. The pains are still there. The conversations of trying to get more visibility is definitely still there. I think sometimes on the fee managed side, owners have a tendency to want to stick to budgets more so than trying to chase after better NOI. And so if you talk to them at a wrong time, or if you get in touch with them while they're, in crunch season, towards, Q3, Q4, or something like that, they're not really looking to bring anything else on, even if it would add NOI to the properties. So that can kind of make things a little bit more complicated. So it's usually a little less red tape to cut through when you're talking to asset owners. So yeah, but I'm sure that's the case for you. I'm sure that's the case for every other prop tech company.
Well, it's becoming interesting, right? Because you've got, it's the documented evidence for that. Third parties are becoming, more owners are using third parties versus doing it themselves, fee managers versus doing it themselves. And so there's, I mean, it is a bottle of wine conversation to figure out, talking about aligned interests, because they are, but they feel like they're not, but they really are. It's kind of like, everyone's got to make money. How do you actually, align that stuff? And we're finding as well, like when we go out and talk about NOI, look, don't anyone hear that I'm suggesting NOI is not a priority for anyone. It's the priority. I don't want that to be heard by anybody, but I'm kind of like, I frame it in terms of, okay, NOI is a priority, but what do you like F5 and F5, and now I'm dating myself again. That's like refresh the browser, right? What are you F5ing every single time a day? And you can't F5 on NOI. You can maybe if you're leasing side of things, because you're grabbing revenue, looking at leases. But on the maintenance side of things, it's like I'm looking at work orders, I'm looking at vendors, I'm looking at make readies, I'm looking at that board. And so I want to see that data in real time, because it's about getting the job done, not, which helps drive NOI. It's a NOI is a product of, of resources and of quantity and speed. And so like your quality and speed. And so if I can speed up quality, I can improve quality or speed up execution, then I get NOI. Like NOI is like an outcome, not a input. And so the conversation around NOI with third parties, our fee managers, is really, it doesn't align with their priorities, because their priorities is making money for their company, which might make things a little bit different than, and I think this is totally fair. Like, don't get me wrong, the audience, like it is totally, everyone should make money. And the fee managers are doing a service for the owners that the owners otherwise don't want to do. They're not good at it. And so what I've found is a lot of our pitches that go to fee managers have to be around their clients' obligations, but then how can we help them make money? How can we help them optimize? How can we help them get the job done faster? Because they're ultimately evaluating how they can get more clients. Like, how do you spin that? And then actually, even the third question is, how do you spin that for the fee managers? And then how do you manage it if they've got their own maintenance company?
If they have, define maintenance company for a second, like a whole construction branch, like what do you mean?
Well, like I've seen it where often you have a maintenance company that is independent from the management company. And so a maintenance company, call it 123 Property Management. It also has 123 Property Maintenance, and 123 Property Maintenance bills 123 Property Management, which then bills the owner. Those different, is that a competing interest for what you guys do, or does that make it really easy, or is that kind of no, that doesn't matter at all? Like when you spoke about organizing all the vendors, et cetera.
Yeah, great question. So I mean, it doesn't usually come up too much. I think the niche with make readies and unit turns specifically is that like not many people do everything with that in-house. Usually when people talk about make readies and stuff, their mind immediately jumps to punch work for maintenance technicians, or a lot of maintenance companies do the punch work for the company that they're partnered with, right? But something that they don't really give too much thought into is the painting, the cleaning, the carpet cleaning, the resurfacing, all that kind of stuff. Sometimes they might hit on one or two of those things in-house, but not super often. So that's kind of where we come in and give this vendor network to have the ability to have all of those bundled into one contractor that you're working with, right? So I have run into a few companies that do the majority of that stuff in-house, but in my experience, they haven't done it by a maintenance company that they partner with. They do it with these roving teams. Sometimes that with these bigger asset companies that we run with. I was talking with a VP the other day. He has a team of make-ready techs
Yeah.
that do all of this kind of stuff, except for he didn't do carpet cleaning or regular cleaning. That was still vendored out. But everything else, he has these guys that he takes and puts on a plane and flies to these different properties that are
You're
backed
kidding me.
up and gets them caught up on stuff just for make readies. And
They're
I
like
was
the
like, that's a
team
very
six.
creative solution, sir. Yeah, yeah. Turn team six, man. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So, like, it works for him. We had a conversation how it's, maybe not the most cost-effective thing in the world, but it's something that they found to be successful for right now, which is great. But I mean, I think it really shows how like creative people can get in this industry too. I think.
Well, I mean, I always like to look in the context of getting to hell yes. Like, there's nothing better than finding a really expensive workaround that seems nonsensical, right?
Yeah.
Because
Especially when they make it seem like it's common sense. They're like, oh, we just do this. We just have SEAL Team 6 come in
yeah.
and do the turn. And you're like, okay, but like, if you could do it this way, wouldn't that be better? And seeing the light bulb go off in their head, it gets me every time. It's always fun.
What I find interesting about like the conventional solutions that, they may own that innovation, like they may have an emotional attachment to the way they do things because it was their idea or someone else's idea or one of their mentees' ideas. And so you end up with like this emotional attachment to the way things are done. And maybe they are flying on Southwest or Spirit, and it's like $49 a flight, and that's still cheaper than catching a cab. Maybe they're, I don't know. I mean, I just can't imagine the logistics around checking your tools. Like just the tools alone and the supplies seems to me like a blocker, but it's working for somebody. But like, asking about those questions and going, okay, so like, here's what is the upside of choosing Rent Ready or making a change? And what's the best thing that could happen there, right? And then what's the worst thing that could happen if you stay with status quo? And exploring that conversation a little bit and letting them answer their own questions around how this is going to affect their overall success personally and corporately. Because like it is hard to get these people to commit to change, and not only to get people to commit to change, especially when something is seemingly not broken.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Actually, I think that one thing with turns specifically, I think everybody's kind of come to the understanding that maintenance, there's a lot of ways to streamline maintenance, right? And so I think that conversation in general can be a little bit smoother, but I think that everybody has been doing turns the same way for so long, and it's such a specific part of the maintenance scope that people haven't really honed in on that yet. And they're like, oh, everybody's doing it this way. I don't need to change because all of my competition is doing it the same way. And that's kind of where we're starting to change the game of saying like, hey, if we're working with, companies like Morgan Properties and stuff to get these turn times standardized and to give you a more predictable turn schedule, then, you're going to be missing out on not just the lost days in rent that, really stack up quick. You're also going to be behind the eight ball in terms of dealing with these competitors in your space that are able to get these units flipped quicker so that they can outpace you. So it's an interesting thing that we're trying to drill down to.
Well, and it's a two-sided problem. Like it's speed and quality. It's because if you just do it fast and you get a handful of work orders this first 90 days, that resident is a very high probability of churning. Just listening to Ray Hespin on the Everness podcast, which by the way, I just absolutely love that podcast. Those guys dig deep and they're fun to listen to. But Ray was talking about some of the work that they have been research they've been exploring around that first 90 days. And this shouldn't be a shocker to anybody. Like the first 90 days in any consumer experience, if it is filled with flaws, you are very likely to exit that car lease. That there's lemon laws around this stuff, that any sort of long-term relationship you're going to exit it if the first 90 days, that's what you remember. And so like he talks a lot about some of the research they've got coming out around if you can make that first 90 days because you did a good turn and because you did maintenance well, now you're looking at a resident might be there 2-3 years, which is going against the grain with what people are suffering through right now, especially given all the other problems that are out there. And so like the problem of speed doesn't quite solve the problem. The problem of quality doesn't quite solve the problem. You've got to solve both. Otherwise you don't get either.
Sorry, you were breaking in and out a little bit. So from what
that.
I heard, you're saying like, how does Ready solve doing things quickly and doing things with high quality? Because I mean, speed and quality are super important.
Well, I think more so around like in terms of the hell yes conversation, like how do you pull at, I mean, thank you for restating it because I can actually rethink the question better. How do you pull at the need to deliver both speed and quality at the same time and digging in on their current alternatives and saying, hey, 18 days, and then you've got 4 work orders in the first 90 days. That was a total disaster. And then, but bringing that up in such a way that it isn't inflammatory, but that they say those words out loud and that they acknowledge that something needs to be changed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. I think one of the tools I like most to kind of shine a light on that is like some of the data that we've collected from customers that we have, right? So I mean, we try and understand where customers are at when we sign them, and track progress and capture KPIs as we go through the partnership to not just show that the partnership is being successful, but also to have like data points that we can help the management company understand how progress is being made, right? So I mean, having a reliability rate of over 95% and a quality rate of over 98% and stuff like that for all of the work that we go out to do are things that we can talk to these management companies about and say like, more often than not, do you even know what your quality rate is for the vendors that you work with, or your reliability rate for the vendors that you work with? And then having that conversation with those KPIs in mind for each property that you're kind of going through, because they all have 10 different vendors that you're using. It starts to really build up quick, and they start to see like, okay, this could be a problem that we're having to try and tackle. But I think it stands to, reason that quality in general, I think, is something everybody understands, and maintenance is like a must-have, right? So, like you said, and like Ray said before, the first 90 days are super critical. There was a thing that Zego put out not too long ago talking about how a resident having a successful or like a good move-in experience where they didn't have to put in a work order or they didn't have to wait for keys or something like that. If they have a good experience with that, it doubles the retention rate. So, I mean, on top of the 90+% of people that are running into issues in the first 90 days not wanting to renew, it's just over and over again being reinforced as a constant reminder of a constant issue in the industry, saying like maintenance needs to be top of mind and needs to be good quality from the get-go to make sure that you can build that relationship with the resident. Because I think not just for move-ins, but I think in terms of residents living in a place that things go, stuff breaks all the time. I think that everybody understands that, but making sure that you have that foundation of trust from the get-go really can help ease the impact of some of those things that might come down the road, So here at Ready, we really try and drive from the data and really show how quality and speed impact things. And I think that's kind of how we work through those talk tracks with our prospects and our clients. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it's really about how do they recognizing that they need to, how are they acknowledging like that they need to change? That's kind of like, by bringing up, is it speed? Is it quality? Is it both? Is it, here's what you want to get to. Here's your objectives. Kind of like, what's the strategy to try and figure out? And this kind of leads into the next question in terms of how do you find them? But how do you figure out what's blocking them from achieving their objectives? So they've got a goal of a leased unit that has they've got a goal of signing a lease to a residence with stay for 2 years, 3 years, right? Which would exceed expectations in most cases. So if that's going to happen, and what things need to go right, and it starts to make ready, because that's what you're getting, And so how do you begin to pull at that to kind of figure out, before they buy, that they are looking to solve that problem, and that problem is impacting their revenue, their operations, or whatever, the people. Like, how do you kind of like pull that out of them from a conversation perspective, or what are you looking for? Like, do you look for, like, what data are you looking for in the that's available in the world to understand that they're looking for a make ready solution?
Okay, I gotcha. So as far as like triggers that we look for, from what I understand, like triggers that we look for
Yeah,
that really
triggers.
signal like somebody's ready to kind of move forward with like a hell yes kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Um, I think that this problem really kind of shows itself a lot more when people are focused on expansion and growth. I think that saying something like time is money is like, everybody understands that in concept, right? But then really focusing in on saying like, if you're trying to grow and you're trying to break into new markets and stuff like that, that's a perfect time where you're realizing like you're trying to hire all these people in this new market and making sure that you're going to hit the KPIs that you're marketing for, right? But without a standard practice, it's a little bit of a shot in the dark sometimes. So I think that we've seen companies in situations like that be really understanding of how a standardized process could be helpful for them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then making sure that it can ensure the quality and time thing that you were talking about before. Having a vendor that you trust and know is really important in this industry. And so I think that those are really good times where we connect with people and talk to them about kind of what they're looking for. And I think it sounds kind of simplistic, but I think just people realizing or looking at occupancy rate when it's below market average, I think is
Mm-hmm.
just another big thing. And they realize like they're having low occupancy, they're having high turn times, and they need to do something about it. And it's usually that the turns are taking too long. I think one of the things that I thought is most interesting from what we've seen here at Ready is that one of the things that's causing the longest uh, one of the things that's prolonging the turn process the most is when property managers or site staff don't schedule the work quick enough because they have 10 billion things going on.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of wait until they get keys, or they kind of wait until they have time to do the pre-walk so that they see what needs to be done to the unit and stuff like that. And next thing you know, a resident moves out, and then it's a day that goes by, 2 days that go by, 3 days that go by before they even go check the unit and then get on the schedule with the painter that they really love. And that painter that they really love and don't want to work with anybody else is booked out for 2 weeks because it's
Mm-hmm.
just one guy in a truck, you know? And so I think that's one of the biggest uh, flags that we see kind of being raised is when people are really trying to take a hard look at occupancy
Mm-hmm.
and realize the correlation with the turn time there. So that answer more of your question.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like, for all of us, it's smart for us to connect the occupancy, because occupancy also plays into both the fee managers and the owners, right? Because the
Oh
fee
yeah,
manager
yeah.
got rent collected, and the owner wants the NOI outcomes. So it's a nice play to get that conversation, and then you can go find occupancy by searching. There's ways to find that data directly and indirectly, so that you can activate and find those people, and then you have the conversation you know, I'm guessing you have the conversation then about like, occupancy, like, what's the plan for this? You kind of dig in and have a conversation with somebody and say, hey, see, do you bring that up right away? Like, hey, thanks for taking the call today. 123 manager, property manager, 123 management. How's things going? What's your first opening sentence there when the occupancy is low?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch the last part of that. One more time.
So imagine,
Do I bring it up? Bring up NOI right away?
Well, how do you bring it up? So imagine from your data points that occupancy is low, but you saying it out loud doesn't really help you very much. So how do you get them to acknowledge that? How do you get them to say what you already know?
Yeah, I mean, fair question. I think that most companies I talk to, we're talking to larger, like enterprise level property management companies. So 9 times out of 10, they already know that their occupancy is. They already know exactly where their occupancy is at. So
Gotcha.
I think helping them understand how that is in the context of their market or in the context of their competitors, I think is more valuable to them, and that's more of an aha moment. So we're able to kind of crunch the numbers with not just what we see on our end, but utilizing different tools and different I'm not sure if you're familiar with ALN, but like ALN has all of the data points for a lot of different management companies around. And so we help utilize that too to show them exactly how their market's doing, how their property's doing in correlation, and all that fun stuff. And so then putting that into context of saying like, hey, if it's a couple points below normal, it's really not a difficult conversation. If they're sitting at 70% occupancy and it's not a lease up, then you need to tread a little lighter there because there's something wrong. But I don't want to shove it in their face and say like, hey, look at this really bad number. What are you doing about it? So I think it's a little bit more of a nuanced conversation of saying like, hey, like notice that this is a little bit below market. I was kind of curious, are you guys running into specific hurdles around this? Like, what's your turn process looking like? Are you dealing with really crappy painters like ABC Company is in Houston too? Like I've heard that the network for vendors for painters is really rough in the area, which is the case for a lot of markets. So I was just on the phone with somebody the other day saying Denver, it was impossible to find anybody to do work that they liked and have good quality and have not just good quality, but I mean have accountability for the job that they're doing because it's tough to build a relationship from the ground and if something goes wrong, I mean it not only freaks out the vendor but then it scares the management company and they don't want to have somebody that is questionable at all about their quality. So it's a little bit more of a nuanced conversation, but I mean I think with bigger management companies it's a little easier than some people might think to bring up that stuff because they're looking at it already.
Can you talk about the data that you're collecting already? Just kind of like, does that data, like when you're having your kind of quarter business reviews with your customers, do you bring up, like, do you lean in on occupancy or do you lean in on the inputs to occupancy? So like, the metrics that you affect, like they may have bought you because they've got an occupancy problem and they connect the dots to make Readies. And so they bought Rent Ready. And then now, like when you're doing your measurements, are you able to connect it back to occupancy or do you kind of stick just to the inputs that you guys control?
It depends on the management company and what their tech stack is like for lease ups, or not for lease ups, but leasing velocity and stuff like that too.
Right.
Usually it's pretty clear to see because if leasing, regardless of what tool they're using, if leasing is seeing that there's a specific date that they feel confident about for unit 12 is going to be ready on October 2nd and they feel confident about it and they like it and it works with the couple prospects that they're talking to or something like that, it's usually able to get leased a lot quicker, which moves the needle on occupancy. So I mean I think one of the biggest hurdles that I've seen in leasing is not being on the same page as maintenance for,
Mhm.
them having to move the move-in date down the road because they realized that, the unit actually still needs to be painted, or they weren't sure if the unit was going to be done in time, so they pushed the move-in date down the road as well. I mean, it's just, I feel like there's not enough communication with most of the companies that I talk to in that specific context where leasing is talking to maintenance and understanding really where things are at. And that's one of the things I really like about our company is because we give you like an Uber experience for the turn. I mean, we have fun little graphs and everything that show you exactly where the turn is at, where people are at, and if the vendor is actually on site doing the work, and then when things get completed, everything gets moved along down this little um, road, kind of like Uber coming to pick
Yeah.
you up. So um, I think that's at least what I've seen be one of the biggest indicators for how like occupancy is getting moved by turns. And I mean, we have dashboards and data that backs it all up too, that we kind of walk through with our customers
Mhm.
to help them understand exactly where these correlations are being made. So we're again always still trying to stay grounded in the data that we're kind of collecting.
Michelle just brought up a good point around that turn standard, which kind of drives us that leasing and communication. Why do you think it like? I mean, you brought up standardizing turns as part of the big change that you guys are able to do, and then digitizing the whole thing. I think it's still a problem in so many different operations because the things that you mentioned are obvious, like motherhood and
I,
apple pie.
I think.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
So okay. What I heard was what is like everything's kind of obvious that I've been saying, and why is it like
Yeah,
why is it so difficult to move from a manual process on the whiteboard?
yeah, like I find that very consistent in property management is that there are things that just seem so obvious and they still resist that directional change. So why the love for the old way of doing things?
It's a great question. um, my honest opinion, from having a short stint on site and working in PropTech for the past couple of years, I think that it's just a, bandwidth issue. I think that so many people are trying to deal with so much, and there's so many like fires, literal fires that are happening
Yeah.
around that they need to put out. It's trying to focus on. So sorry. Trying to focus on how to improve current processes and stuff like that is not the highest thing on a lot of people's priority list. So I think that's why I've been really excited the past year or so. I've noticed more people with like um, strategic operation titles and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And like there's people coming into these positions where they're really starting to look at strategic partnerships and stuff like that to make the life of other people easier within the company. And I think that's going to be huge. So I, I think that when people have the bandwidth to look at some of this stuff and realize that one, change can be really easy with the right partner,
Mhm.
and the grass is greener on the other side with the right partner actually making your life better. I think it's kind of a combination of bandwidth to be able to make those reality. And something else I didn't mention, but I think that in our industry specifically, like I think you were at NIA too, there's
Mhm.
just an overwhelming number of options on everything to make your life easier. And so I think that when they get bombarded with 37 different companies that say, hey, we can make this one specific part of your leasing process easier, they're like, well, I'm not dying. I think things are fine right now. I don't really have time to dive into 37 different options, figure out which one's best and go with it, you know? So
So there's
it
a bit
kind
of a
of loops
paradox of
back to the
choice,
bandwidth thing still too. But that's just my 2 cents.
a bit of a paradox of choice situation. What when you guys were out there,
Yeah, I think so.
people are trying to solve the they identify they've got a problem around make readies. They identify they've attached it to occupancy, revenue, NOI, and then at which point are they've considered some solutions, and we talked about the whiteboard being kind of like our classic competitor, and maybe they thought of vending it out or however they want to solve it, managing themselves, and you guys come to the table and have a conversation. You show them the way, like this is the nirvana. Here, we're gonna take this whole basket of this hornet's nest that's burning on your desk. We're gonna take it off your lap. We're gonna make some money at it, and here's the exchange of value, the trade-off we're talking about here. We're gonna coordinate the vendors. We're gonna coordinate all the admin and overhead. We're gonna be no drop balls, no fumbles, and people go, yeah, that's I want, and then they go, not now, not this quarter, not right now. We're too busy. The too busy one is one you and I chatted about earlier. It's just like it's maddening, but it's the truth. Like you get objections, and what typical objections do you normally get? And then what happens to those objections or those people?
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I think we're getting a delay here. Like what objections do you typically hear after you've made like we said earlier, the obvious no-brainer, compelling case? They come to you with a problem. You made the argument, you made the kind of like reasonable person positioning, and they still say no, or they still say not now. What kind of things do you guys hear? What kind of objections do you hear, and why?
Yeah, great question. I think that one of the big things that we hear, like you mentioned before, is just not right now. Timing. For whatever reason. I mean, if it's a budgeting thing, if it's a, we're going through an acquisition of seven. It's I think always kind of coming down to we've been doing this and this is the status quo. This is how we work. I think that if we get to a point where they agree and say like, oh, I think your solution's better, but this is how we've been doing things. It's really trying to shine a light on like how changing from status quo will be beneficial, or kind of shining a light on like if you continue down the road you're going, like this is what you could be potentially missing out on by not working with us right now, right? And I mean, I think that us working in such a data-driven market and such a numbers-focused kind of business model is really where that can be helpful. Is because I mean, we can do some quick math and be like, if you guys are having 15-day turn times, which is still better than the average of 18, right? But if you guys are having 15-day turn times and you want to bring it down to 10 days, national average for rent a day is about $50. And so, I mean, you're saving, $250, right? But then it doesn't sound like too much if you're saying $250, but then scoping it out to a 200 unit property, right, with 50% turnover in a year, that turns into $25,000 really quick, right? And so you can take that quick math and kind of say like, if you don't think that this is the right time to do this partnership right now, if you think it's going to be next month or 2 months from now or something like that, you can literally do the math with them and say you will lose this amount of money by not partnering with us now. And you can use conservative numbers because I mean, not everything's perfect, right? But I mean, you can walk them through the math of the impact of that decision. And if it makes sense for them, which it usually does, because again, it's a lot better of a solution than a whiteboard and sticky notes, then you can usually get on the same page of saying like, is this worth it to you? And sometimes it's a yes. I mean, sometimes they have a lot of reasons as to why they don't want to move forward at that specific time. And that's totally fine. I don't want it to sound pushy, but like, I want to help them understand that there's a financial impact that is constantly happening to them because they're going with the status quo, right? And I think that that's kind of a shift in mindset that a lot of people make as we're having these conversations, because they're kind of connecting those dots with you during these conversations, because
Mhm.
changing from the status quo is such a difficult like switch to flip, if that makes sense.
Well, I mean, especially like we were doing some math again to the math conversation. Um, in terms of level of effort, right? If you just take a single building and a single property, and you start calculating the level of effort for turns, level of effort of managing maintenance, they're like equal. Especially that 50% turn building. It's basically a churn building. It's basically, it's like I think I said 1,000 units is like 9,000 hours, and maintenance requests is like 8,000 hours. So what's interesting about the relationship in terms of maintenance is that you're asking your people to multitask, and both of them have an SLA on it. So I've got one SLA on the resident side of things that says I've got to respond within 48 hours and maybe have the work order closed. And I've got another SLA on the turn side of things that says that it can float up to that 18 days because there isn't a resident in that unit. But in terms of like, if anyone's student of Stephen Covey, like urgent and important, and then urgent and not important, and I'm not suggesting that obviously we're in the resident maintenance business, but like the putting that paintbrush down to go investigate a GFCI flip in 1302 is a very expensive brush being put down when you consider the $60 a day that you're foregoing, right? Because the context switching that you're asking the maintenance techs to do is severe. And I don't know if there's enough conversations around that, because if you could take all of your effort from a turn perspective and remove that from your maintenance squad, you can immediately start getting higher ratios, which immediately solves a problem around having open job positions and staffing. And then if you have better turns, you've got higher retention rates, which actually reduces the workload that you need for turns. So it's just like if you need a break stop or a break glass moment in your business of where you can begin to improve resident experiences, it starts at the turn on a speed and quality perspective. So you have the unit available and it's done to spec, and it's at a point that Michelle's saying here is that there's competitive alternatives out there for the residents, and so for our prospects. And so like if you break glass on turns, you can begin to ultimately improve the health of the entire property, because you can make it less effort for the maintenance technicians. There's less context switching, less jobs turns or that get stopped. You get better specialization around what a term really looks like. You get standardization, like all these freebies that come from breaking the glass on asking a single or a team of maintenance techs to do turns and resident requests, because it just and then in addition to cleaning up the site and all that sort of stuff, like it's just too much work. And the prioritization of which work to be done, we're leaving it up to that maintenance tech, and we've told them, oh, by the way, you have to finish all you have to close your work in 8 hours. So it's like designed to fail the way it's set up in most properties. And so it's no wonder that people are stuck with this problem, and the material impacts that it makes to the P&L or even the quality of life or the health of the building are not too. It doesn't take too. You don't need a big, huge drawing to figure out and connect the dots for everybody. It's interesting when we talk about the lack of people in the world that do good work for this kind of work, how unwilling folks are.
That you didn't touch on really either, and I think it might be.
Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I definitely see the lag thing you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
I think that one thing that you didn't really touch on, that at least I've noticed personally, is like turn work isn't always the number one thing that maintenance techs want to do. I mean, it's usually seen as more of the boring kind of jobs, and they're not as like they don't get to interact with residents. They feel pressured to get these things done quick and all that kind of stuff. And it's like I think it's part of the reason why a lot of people like vendoring it out. A lot of property management staff like vendoring it out. It's because it's not the most fun thing to do for their techs. So I think that plays into the conversation that you're having too. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just
No,
wanted to
that's
throw
fine.
that in there too.
No, I think we've got a bit of a tech lag here that's kind of making the flow a little bit staccato. All good. I appreciate you jumping in. When you take a look at your career and the things that you learn along the way, and especially with respect to getting to hell yes buyers, what's a piece of advice you'd give yourself when you were younger, starting your career, maybe even halfway through, or maybe even new people that are joining Rent Ready in terms of trying to be successful?
It's a great question. I think for this industry specifically too, I think that the phrase like "be patient" definitely comes to mind the most. I think having patience and understanding that this industry is a hectic one. It's not like people and everybody's really nice, and so I think it's a combination of trying to understand that people have a lot going on, and to be present with them through the things that are happening is a really important thing that it took me a minute to try and grapple with, because I was like, it was my job to get in touch with them and talk to them about this solution and why aren't they getting back to me and all this stuff. And it was causing me a lot of anxiety when I first started. And I think understanding that it's like there's a lot of things going on. They have a lot of different priorities that they're trying to juggle in this industry, especially when you start talking to enterprise level clients that are working in different markets. As To me, as soon as a company cracks into multiple markets, the number of things that they're trying to juggle and stuff just skyrockets, because they're dealing with everything that they would be dealing with a property management company in one area and all the different vendors that they're having to deal with, especially with maintenance. But then multiplied by a ton, because all the different markets have different standards, different vendors is a given. But I mean, all these differences, the seasonality. I mean, you're dealing with way different kinds of maintenance requests in Seattle than you are in Florida. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? And so, trying to juggle all that, I think it's really been a cornerstone for me to realize that like being present is one of the most important things um, in the industry during a sales cycle, um, and understanding that conversation will continue if it seems like it's a good product that you have and it's a good conversation that you're having. Like, just give it time, things will work out. It'll be okay. Just have some patience with it. Is something I wish I would have told myself when I first started.
Yeah. I think it goes along the lines of the conversation we were having earlier around, despite all the compelling, like, common sense to commit to change, there's still a reluctance to commit to change.
Yeah,
And we got to be patient for that. Who should we talk
100%.
to next on the show?
I was wondering if you've had a chance to talk with Ray yet. Have you had Ray on your
I had
show?
Ray on. I actually probably should have him back because, yeah, Ray is a gem. I caught up with him early January. But he's got some new research out there, I think, right now that it'd be worthy to have him back on again. I'll ping him. He's got
Yeah,
his big
no, he's
conference
great.
in a couple weeks, so I'll give him some breathing room for that, and then I'll get back in his calendar. He's a gem.
Yeah,
We can talk
early
about his.
September MX Summit. Yeah.
Yeah, MX. Are you guys going to MX Summit?
I'm not this year, no. But I keep seeing all my old coworkers posting about it on LinkedIn and stuff. They're all really excited. So it sounds like it's going to be great. They're going to a rodeo this year, which I think is super fun. That was a great idea.
I love rodeos. I'm a big fan. He's gonna have a good time there. Yeah, I've got a conflict that week as well, but it's a good. I mean, I'm a big Midwest guy, obviously, so like fan. So I'm a Western culture person too, so they'll have some fun there. Good ad. We'll get back in the race calendar.
Yeah.
He's always available for that kind of conversation. So for everyone listening, thanks for tuning in today. Appreciate it. Lessons to be listened to and on is that never be invited back. Oh, come on, Michelle. You will have me back 100%. conversations around being patient, so being mindful. So there's a fast and slow conversation here. So in order to get to hell yes, you've got to be patient and be present in order to find those that are ready to commit to change. And so that if I heard you correctly, that is your piece of advice, is that being patient, being present, adding value to your market, be consistent, all those things, so that you can be available for them when they need to seek change. Because there is a common sense event that occurs, that people are forced to choose a priority that's different than their current priorities, and that often looks like software or technology. Jake, thanks a lot for your time today. Really appreciate it. Appreciate you tuning.
I think that's a great way to summarize it.
Yeah, and everyone listening to the podcast, if you're listening to the live show,
thanks for having me, man. It was great.
Yeah, no problem. Hang tight. Everyone listen to the show live. We've got a new page dedicated to getting the hell yes. Take a look at the page, link and follow that. If you're listening on LinkedIn after the fact, add comments. Both of us would get it. And if you're on the podcast or on YouTube, obviously like and subscribe. That's how the system works. More people can find us, and we can help more people with this conversation and have a little more fun as a group. Thanks everyone for joining today. Have a wonderful day, and really go have a great week. Take care. Bye, everyone.